I want to acknowledge, and I want to honor. I want to honor those tears that were shed. I've been taught by some of the most prolific professors, but my grandmother, with her third grade education, she told me that I earned every tear. Your physiological response is your first indicator of your emotional implications. What you are feeling in your physical body that we have become so disconnected with has been giving you signs and signals since the beginning.
Welcome to How Do You Divine? An open conversation on how our perspectives differ based on our culture, experiences, and exposure to the world. In each episode, we'll explore how we have defined fundamental aspects of life while leaving space to learn, converse, and possibly expand or modify these definitions. Join me on this journey filled with laughter, intrigue, and most of all, courage, because true growth happens in the space between uncertainty and vulnerability. Our goal is to provoke meaningful conversations rooted in humility. I am Sanika, and let's define a divine existence. We'd like to welcome Dr. Asheena Baez to the podcast. Woo!
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, first, I just want to introduce the audience to you and all your greatness, right? Chief Executive Officer of Asheena Baez Consultancy. And as an adjunct professor at Columbia University, Russell Sage Doctoral Program Organizational Cultural Strategist, and Complex Systems Leadership and Well-Being Consultant of the New York City Department of Education. You've done phenomenal things.
Praise God.
You have done phenomenal things. Of all of your accomplishments, you've devoted the last 2 years of your life to leadership, organization, helping people become more mindful. And today I really wanted to invite you here to talk about service and what it means to be of service, because I feel like in all of the spaces in which you occupy, you are truly of service. And I first wanted, before we talk about your today greatness, can we start with how did you come to being of service in this mind space?
Well, I think my journey began as a little girl. I was raised by my grandmother in the South Bronx. My grandmother was the grandmother that could make $1 out of 15 cents. My grandmother was the one who could feed everybody in the community. Everybody's kid was her child. So seeing her and her selfless service, I would literally sit at her feet and just watch her speak to anyone, no matter what station of life they were in, and she would always make them feel held and heard. So I think epigenetically, it's in my genes to be of service. So I think it started then. Born and raised in the Bronx, I was able to go to school in the Bronx and just watch the community in the 80s go from amazing to not so amazing with the crack epidemic, and watching how people psychologically shifted as a result of what was happening in our community. I knew as a little girl I was going to create or curate the conditions to heal. So in my mind and my spirit, service is connected to healing. So I believe that I had an anointing over my life as a child to heal, or even as an adult to curate the conditions for folks to heal themselves. So I think mindfulness in this mind space that I'm in right now is really creating that psychological flexibility that's needed and necessary so that everyone with a face knows that they were born to be well. Like it's their birthright.
It's your birthright to be well. I think that in itself is such a gem. It's your birthright to be well.
Yes.
And there's so much to say for that experience, right? And I think so many people who have seen their community at its healthiest, and then something like the crack epidemic comes in and kind of causes trauma beyond generations, right? And how do you feel that being there, kind of being in the center of the storm, how did that heighten your awareness to be able to serve? Because I often feel that our people, while we are unwell, are guarded. And that's part of our trauma response. It's part of how we maintain wellness enough to continue.
Yes.
So how do you feel like being in that epicenter of the storm help and being, by your grandmother's side showed you the cracks in which you can enter for illness?
Yeah, I think it's the beautiful thing is my grandmother would have all of these sayings, and she would always talk about calling a thing a thing. Call a thing a thing. And when we call a thing a thing, we get to say we as a community, we as a people, indigenous people, we have been functionally dysfunctional for a long time. And when we don't tend to our social emotional needs, our psychological needs, we can go into the world and we can work and we can do all of those things, but we will never find contentment. Because what we get to realize in this work is that happiness is not having what you want, it's wanting what you have.
Oh.
So it's this ability.
Happiness is wanting what you have.
Yeah. So when folks are striving and they're buying all of these things and they're trying to really make themselves happy, they get to that point that they have every physical thing, tangible thing, but the intangible, right? God says it's the unseen. Faith is an assured expectation of a thing though not yet beheld. So it's the things that you can't see but you know are real.
Yeah.
And when we have psychological deficits, we tend to overcompensate. Psychologically speaking, there's two thought patterns. There's usually the enough path and the more path. When you're on that more path, you need more time, you need more money, you need more people, you need more things. When you seek and you shift from that scarcity to abundance, you realize you are enough. And if you are enough, then that means you have enough. So to be able to be in the epicenter of whether the crack pandemic or even now as a psychological expert during the pandemic, I was a principal during the pandemic in a public school and watching teachers, I was on Long Island at the time, watching the scarcity that came into the building amongst teachers, amongst families. Rightfully so. This was the most horrific thing that we could ever imagine.
Globally.
But thinking about what this training allowed me to do. So every morning, every teacher of my building, we met virtually and I did a meditation with them. I chose meditation because it was the closest thing that I could get to prayer in schools.
Oh, I love that.
And when we meditate, I get to speak truth to power. I get to speak into children. I get to speak into my teachers. I get to speak into my parents. And by doing that, we were able to transition to, a hybrid or a digital model without an issue because my students already know that they knew that they were seen and heard.
And that they're loved.
And that's the number one piece, right? I think love is the most powerful force in human nature and you can't fake it.
Girl.
Can't fake it. So I think that's really how I was able to do it, is really understanding that faith is an assured expectation of a thing though not yet beheld, having that faith and knowing that being an educator, being a leader, being a professor, those are not careers for me. They were callings. So when you are in alignment with your divine assignment and you've been called to do a work and you position yourself with the purpose that's on your life, then it's not work. It's being. I think we were human beings before we were human doings. And we've just been doing all the things. And we've been neglecting our being. So psychologically, I think what I get to do is remind people how to turn the resolution up in their life spiritually. I get to tap into them and say, look at who you get to be moment to moment. I want to teach you how to honor everything that you are equally to everything that you are not. We don't like to look at the things that we are not. But it's looking at the things that we are not that we get to fully appreciate the fact that there's a lot of people that'll stand with you in the sun. Sarah. But none of them will stand with you sometimes in the storm. And some of them going to throw water on you in the storm.
Listen.
So you got to hold your
drown.
Come on.
Drown.
There you go. So in calling a thing, you get to say, you know what? I am enough. I have enough. I am worthy and I am worth it. And you get to show up. You get to choose how you show up for yourself, how you show up for your family, how you show up professionally. You remind yourself that this is a choice. My grandma used to wake me up the same way every day. She would say, Asheena, you made the list. I say, Grandma, what list? She said, a lot of people went to sleep last night thinking that they was going to wake up.
list, girl. You preaching it in the day.
They didn't wake up. And she said, so if you woke up, that means you got two things already, baby. I said, what's that, Grandma? She said, you got a chance and you got a choice. Your waking up is evidence of your chance. But the moment you put your foot on that ground, baby, is evidence of your choice. We live by the choices we make. And some of us die by the choices we make.
Amen.
We got to remind ourselves that we get to choose ourselves. And that's not selfish. That's self-preservation so that we can serve.
Yes.
That's what service is. Service is saying, I love myself enough to know that if I give myself in service, I get to do three things really well. The number one thing that I get to do really well is I get to create healthy boundaries so that I can serve. And people think boundaries is a bad word. But boundaries, girl, boundaries are the way that we teach the people who we love how to love us back. It's a teaching.
And I say it all the time. Boundaries is how you teach someone how to treat you.
Period.
And it's, there's something to be said about boundaries. And as you can tell, I'm big on words, right? There's something to be said about boundaries because I think unfortunately, in our community, we see boundaries as a limitation where others see boundaries as empowerment.
Yeah.
And I don't understand where that came from. And I'm truly always disheartened by it, honestly.
Yeah.
It really hurts my heart that we've come to mass these different things into boundaries.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't do exactly as you want me to do, it's not I'm not loyal. Now it's you're not loyal now.
Yeah.
Because I'm holding up a boundary of something that I feel would hurt me. Or we've crossed lines. Do you understand what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I think it's interesting, like you said, that service is one, knowing that you are worthy enough to serve.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's a conversation of what can I give?
Right.
Right. Because I think that's how people don't move into service because they feel like, I barely got enough, girl. They're
that's scarcity. That's scarcity when you think about it, right? And a lot of people would not connect boundaries into a conversation about service. But the reality is that for some of us who are functionally dysfunctional, we give beyond what we can and we're left depleted. So when I speak of service, I speak harmoniously of boundaries, because if we're teaching people how to love us, and I mean folks with your same last name, your bloodline, you have to create healthy boundaries with them, because you have to sit in this awareness that this boundary that I'm setting doesn't mean that I don't ever talk to you. It means that I get to restrict access when it's no longer healthy. I love you, but I'm going to restrict access because when I am in your company, I'm usually left feeling negative, or I'm feeling
or depleted.
Right. So you get to call a thing. You get to love them. You get to honor them. And I think sometimes when we look at boundaries, we have to actually look at something deeper. And that is sometimes our level of self-awareness within ourselves. Sometimes we are people pleasing and we're in this mode of just trying to get folks to like us, that we keep going.
It in pursuit of favor. We are constantly sometimes in a pursuit of favor.
Yeah.
Rightfully so with our loved ones. But like you say, if my engagement with you turns out to be depleting, negative, and I don't feel well, it is only right that as a human, you start to restrict those moments in your life.
Yeah.
And I love how boundaries and service align. Do you understand what I mean? Because I think in order for someone to value themselves and understand that you are of value enough to be of service, right? You need to also know your boundaries,
right?
Because who can pour from an empty cup?
Right. You're right. It's so beautiful to create the circumstances by which someone can serve. You begin to see, how do you serve yourself? And that sounds like ego, but a lot of my clients, I put them through 30 days of the making the bed challenge. And I tell them your first act of service should be making your bed every morning for 30 days. And they're like, Dr. Baez, making my bed, how is that going to translate.
Yeah.
I said, the reality is, when you make your bed, you get to lay in it, right? Mm-hmm. But when you make your bed, in my program, in my theory, in my philosophy, you have to be able to state emphatically what you're grateful for while you're doing it. So they're fixing their sheet, I'm grateful for my children. They're fixing their blanket, I'm grateful for my spouse. They're fixing their pillow, I'm grateful for my mom. And I'm telling them how to interrupt the inner talk. Because when you're trying to serve, sometimes that inner voice is louder than the act of service you're trying to create. So when you're making your bed and the first thing that you do, you're actually giving this act of service to yourself, but then you're stating out loud these affirmations, this gratitude moment, which you then start to see at day 15 or so. They said they realized there was a joy that came because if nothing went right during that day, when they came home and they saw that made bed, it reminded
yes, it was a reminder
that I started my day like that. And imagine if we lived our life like that, like creating these small ripples in the timeline to be able to say, look, this is how I get to show up for myself so that I can show up for others. In order to serve others, you have to be able to be gentle with yourself. You have to be able to really start to love yourself. And I say start because I work with a lot of adults who just don't.
Because it's conditioning. Right? It's how you've been raised. It's what our parents knew, it was just survival mentality, right? And it's so difficult to come from survival mentality to transition into self-awareness, to transition into self-love, because there's so many steps. It's a continuum. The journey is so deep and doesn't have a timeline, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. I just believe, though, we have to interrupt whatever is happening right now to begin that journey, because that's where sustainability is going to come. Psychologically, mentally, emotionally, because the continuum is like in 3 cycles. And this is a lot of the research that I've done around self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-actualization. It literally falls in this continuum. And I think for some folks, we tend to think like emotionally they can't control what's happening to them. But the reality is you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to control everything outside of you because you can't. You're supposed to surrender, and folks feel like it's really difficult to surrender. And I think the beautiful thing about what you do is you honor words. Surrender does not mean to give up. When we think of the movies and you see someone surrender and they put their hands up, but surrender spiritually literally means to yield. It means to yield to the possibility that God is trying to show you something moment to moment. And if we just yield. Grandma used to say, hurry up and slow down. We used to run in the house, hurry up and slow down, y'all. And you'd be like, Grandma, how you going to hurry up and slow down? But when I turned 40, I got it. I didn't understand it at 4, but when I turned 40, I got it. Hurry up and slow down. We're moving so fast that we're on autopilot and we're forgetting that we get to have joy now. When you slow down long enough, you recognize that, you realize you get to say, if it's going to take me to be self-aware, to finally begin to accept myself so that I can actualize the things that I want for myself in my life, then I get to slow down. It's a get to, not a got to.
Yeah.
Right? You get to slow down.
Yes. It's a privilege. It's the privilege. Yeah. I call it the privilege of presence.
I love that.
The privilege of being present. Yeah. And it's so funny, just going back to the making of the bed, like in Caribbean culture, I'm Jamaican. There was no choice about making your bed. Like the bed aftermath. Bed. But it's so interesting that, as you said, as we get older, when it was taught to us, it was not necessarily punishment, but structure. Yeah. The house must look good. Make your bed, open up the windows. Yes. And as we got older, we realized it's because when you come off the street, and you pass your bedroom, it's like a welcoming hello. Like, I was here, beautiful, waiting for you. Yeah. I was here, ready. Yes. You took the time to care. Yes. For where you would be mentally and emotionally later on in the day. That's it.
I think it's the difference between a routine and a ritual. Right? When we were children, the structure was so that we would have a routine. When you become an adult, you realize the power in creating any natural routine into a ritual, because what it does is it reinforces psychologically that you're safe. So that's why it could be a routine of making the bed, but the ritual is I'm going to add a gratitude practice into this. The routine could be I'm going to take a shower, but you can actually mindfully take a shower by stating anything that no longer serves me, I watch it as it goes down the drain. You can mindfully drive, and every red light, you just take a breath. Like, you can create this possibility of being present by just doing small tweaks in your regular routines.
And that's sort of that presence piece, I think, is important. And in order to get there, just again, talking about that continuum is being aware. Being aware of where you are in your mind and the thoughts that you have in your mind. Right? Because I think in the same way how boundaries align with service, I also think superiority. Because I think we tend to have this fixation on superiority when it comes to service at its face value, right? And in your work, how do you feel that you are conscious of not appearing superior, but an authority?
Well, I'm going to tell you that I am superior. Because I serve a mighty God. Like, he doesn't make anything inferior. So I would have to be superior, but I will tell you, I know how to serve from a place of sameness and maintain my superiority, because what I know is that I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. So the ones that are calling themselves superior, it's because they're clinging on to the titles of this world. When I say I'm superior, I mean spiritually. Like, I understand I'm a professor at Columbia University, and when I'm teaching a lot of entitled children, they're children. I love them, but they're entitled, children, right? And they're telling me how to do things, and I love it, because I'm like, I just watch them, because I teach self-awareness and leadership. So I laugh because I get to remind them that who you are anywhere is who you are everywhere. So the same way that you are vying for control, right? Here in this room is how you're going to try to lead a school when you graduate from this master's program. I get to remind you that the strength will always be in the we, not in the I. So if I say that I'm superior, it's because I have a whole tribe of ancestors, both here and past. I have a whole tribe of amazing advisors that are phenomenal women. I make sure that this level of superiority is a communal awakening that says, I'm not standing here alone. I'm standing on the backs of my ancestors. So yes, we are superior, but we understand the beauty of sameness, because Jesus was everything to everyone. So he can have a conversation with anyone where they are.
Preach.
I think it's about meeting people where their entry point is and helping them to get to where you're going. Rumi once stated that we're all here to walk each other home. That's it. That's the only reason why we're here. So as we are walking each other home, we get to share in this service of saying, look, if you make it this far, you are supposed to bring others with you. You're not. You have to look back, and that's
why it's so interesting, because it's not. It is of service, but it is of being. It is of being. Like, I don't know of one successful person that can stand tall and say, I did it on my own. It was me and me with a side of me without, and that's what I mean. And I feel like it's not of God.
No.
Do you know what I mean? And I think it's interesting that I love the way you frame superiority in that way, because I think superiority and service in the way I think our community has seen it, in a way that has turned them away. To be frank, sometimes in those structural church, religious places, and and there were people that were also battling with their own, and that's why I always am very conscious of, let's see people as individuals and not institutions.
Yes. And that's difficult, because what happens is when you are entrenched in religion, you lose relationship. And for me, I see deep, intimate relationship with God. And when I find relationship with his people, it hits different.
Girl, speak on it.
Church is a building, but relationship, like God is not just beside me. God is within me. I have this awareness that wherever I go, whatever mountain that, is before me, it's him holding my hand that allows me to go. It's not me. It's not my strength. It's not my power. But when you are in a hierarchy, sometimes in an institution, whether it's Columbia University or the church, you got to give room for people to be people so that you leave room for God to be God. Only God is going to
humans will be a human. Like,
you gotta let
human
them.
will show up in human. Like, what I mean?
You gotta let them. And I think it's really self-awareness where you get to say, you get to be and do whatever it is you need to be and do. And I get to do that as well. And I get to not be swayed by where you are in your journey of healing, of leading, of service. Because I'm not going to judge you.
Yeah.
I won't. Because to judge you means that I will, in essence, lose favor with my God. So my favor with my God becomes more important than this judging of you.
Speak on it. And to me,
not to be.
I think that should be amplified. That I treat people based on God's favor to me.
It's not
about how you have shown up.
That's how you get to really forgive. See, this is the part that we don't talk about in public. The ways in which you treat people, the level at which you forgive people is a direct reflection of your relationship with God, of your favor with God. And I think if we actually looked at forgiveness, and this is not with others always, I'm talking about the level at which you forgive yourself.
Ooh.
Because if you can't forgive yourself, then forgive God's child. That's you. Like if you can't forgive the mistake that you made based on the tools that you had at the time, and you're calling yourself a child of, you have to be able to pause, stop, and reflect, because the favor is what's actually going to make you get to that next level. But I think forgiveness, and I don't know, my spirit is just saying right now, like forgiveness, especially amongst our people, is probably the antidote for 99% of the elements that we face, because we are epigenetically disposed not to be forgiving of ourselves sometimes. We're so much harder on ourselves than anyone else can be, because I'm thinking right now in this moment about some of the things we even tell ourselves based on it.
To discredit ourselves, to diminish ourselves, to tell ourselves that you can just be enough. And that is, I love what you said, the forgiving of yourself. You know what I mean? I love that, because I do see that it all, for some apparent reason, going back to service, like for some apparent reason, we are grudgeful. Not only to others, but to ourselves.
Yes.
Right? And the benchmarks that we create, it's like, oh, I didn't do this enough, or I didn't acquire that enough, so therefore I can't do X.
Right.
Therefore I can't do Y.
Right.
And I think forgiveness is so powerful.
It covers a multitude of things.
It's so powerful.
The reality is too, when we think about service, the correlation. So think about, during this conversation, we correlated a lot of amazing aspects of the human psyche with service. So we first said service is interconnected with boundaries. Then we said service is interconnected with love. Right now we're saying service is interconnected with our ability to forgive. I think it's imperative for us to really realize that the service that we are speaking of is one in which we get to curate the conditions for everyone with the face to begin to see, when you say you love God, but you can't love yourself, you can't forgive yourself, that is a massive disconnect. So if you're struggling right now to forgive yourself, and I'm not talking about the great big things.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the little things. Like, for some of us, we speak so negatively to ourselves, just even with our physical appearance. Like we're looking in the mirror, we're posting, looking at Instagram, comparing ourselves amongst ourselves. And
let's talk about it. It's like you could be a 2, an 8, a 10, a 12, a 16. And I'm so fortunate. I always feel like I'm so fortunate on that journey that I have been a 6, a 8, a 12, a 14, a 16. And I'm just like, but I'm that girl though.
Yeah.
Like I've always felt like I'm her. She is me. She gonna come through with the come through every single time.
That is not easy for people to do. So it's a beautiful thing that you can be that, because what happens is we usually compare ourselves amongst ourselves. And this is why Instagram is so popular.
Yeah.
Like we spend our time looking at the filtered version of people, and then we can't figure out why our lives are what they are. We diminish ourselves based on things that are not even real.
That are not even real. And that to me is what drives me most crazy.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, and that's why I have this love-hate relationship with social media, to be honest with you. Listen, when I tell you I have a love-hate relationship with social media, because I'm just like, in real life, I'm her.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, and it's hard for me even to see people I love curate this version of themselves for likes and favor of people that, I wouldn't say people that don't care about you, people you don't know, people you can't impact, people you can't progress. So what is the point?
Yeah, you know what's so beautiful though, when you're saying this, I'm just thinking about Samaria. Like, I'm thinking about Bible, like and just how we've always had this version of looking over the fence.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful when you think about, because I'm on a social media fast. So usually every 3 to 6 months, I'll take a month off or 60 days off. And mostly because it becomes important for me to just be in intimacy with God. And I have to always remind myself that Jesus wasn't liked or followed. Right. So if Jesus, so why, like,
talk about it?
I have to be able to acknowledge that, so that I use it for what it's supposed to be. And when you are, I think about the 3 Hebrew boys, and you could say, I'm not going to eat that delicacy, and I'm going to be over here and do these stuff. But if you are amongst it, right, you become consumed by it. I call it subconscious consumption. Subconscious consumption.
It is. Like, you cannot be around or in spaces of negativity and tell yourself, I am light.
Yeah, right. And I think what I get to see, if I'm honest, even within myself, the brightest lights have the darkest shadows.
Ooh.
So sometimes some of the images that you see on social media triggers the darkness that is inside, is the darkness in us. As much as I love the Lord, as much as I walk in harmony with his practices and principles, there is still patterns of behavior that have been implanted in me for a long time.
I call it the street. It's, like, if you're from the street, you know what they say, you can take the girl out of Brooklyn, but you can't take Brooklyn out the girl. And when you from the boogie down, so at
I'm from the Bronx, so everybody from the Bronx, we have holy, but we have hood, so that means pray with me, but don't play with me. Right? like for real. So we get to love the humanness of this.
Yes.
We get to say, I am going to serve from where I am.
Yes.
So it might look different. Service from me versus service from you versus service from someone else. But the reality is you get to start today from where you are.
And I think that's, what's interesting? I always said Jesus did his best work out in the street. And that's the reality of it, because I feel like we needed those experiences. Yes. That's why the darkness still exists, because we can relate to it. Because we can call people out of it. Because we can say, oh, it's fine. Been there, done that.
Yes.
Did you forgive you? God forgave you.
Long time.
God forgave you. Did you forgive you? You are, and in addition to forgiveness, you are qualified.
That's it.
You are qualified solely because you are within his kingdom.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, when you said you are qualified, my spirit said, not only are you qualified, but you were recommended. You came highly recommended. Our Father said, no, I recommend this one. Like, I'm gonna put favor on her, and favor isn't fair. That's the thing that folks don't. We say that in church, but we don't really realize the weight of that. Because if I look at my life, and I'm sure if we look closely in everyone's life, you'll see certain things. If it wasn't for God, you would have never made it out that
situation.
So honor that, right? And honor that in a way that allows you to be able to say, okay, that test is going to become my testimony. And if that's my testimony, then I owe it to someone or something to really give of myself in service. And service is not just the food pantry and you know, coats for folks during the cold
or
season.
Turkey during Thanksgiving.
Service could be taking your niece for the weekend when your sister is struggling because she's a teenager and don't know what to do, how to be. Service could look like you talking to that one kid on your block that's just always outside by themselves, and you just saying, I see you and I'm so proud of you. The reason why all of the examples that I gave speaks to examples of uplifting children is because in my work, I work with adults, but the best work that I do is when I'm in these schools working with children, because I get to go to transfer high schools where every high school has kicked out children and then they have to come to a transfer high school. And it's the greatest work because when they perceive that the whole world doesn't want them and doesn't love them, and the first thing that I come into that school to say, before I begin speaking to you, I know you never met me before, but I need you to know something because I'm about to tell you something that is going to transform you. And they looking at me and I'm saying, yeah, I'm going to transform you because the most powerful force in human nature is love. And I've loved you from the moment you woke up today. My God has been preparing me just to speak to you. And when you are loved in this way, you're loved in this ancestral way. You're called to act differently. You can no longer act like a child that is unloved.
Yeah.
And all of them just pause and they look at me and I say, okay, now we can begin. And the moment that I step foot in that class, from the moment that I leave that building, everyone with a face, I am pouring in love. A principal messaged me. She texted me yesterday. She said, what did you tell, so she's like, because she came and she's just different. I said, no, that's love.
I was just going to say
God.
that. Isn't it the power of love?
It's
the power
of service. Love is service. God is love. Of all of the qualities in the Bible, God has this, God does this, God. But it says God is love, John. God is love. And if we can reflect and remember and recall that can pull us out of our darkest moments to realize, come what may.
Yeah.
You are loved. You are lovable. You are worthy of love.
Yes.
Whether it's love from a family member, love from a mate, love for your child.
Or love from a stranger on the street.
From yourself.
Oh,
that's where I land. Because I think if we can get not just our children, but dare I say the inner children, because I talk to a lot of adults where I see their inner child. I'm like, if somebody could have just loved you up some more, you would have been different. So what you get to do is love her now. So sometimes, like, my name is Asheena, so I say sometimes she shows up, the little version of me. She come and she's kicking and she's mad. I'm doing the dishes and my kids think I'm crazy. I got 6 kids. My kids think I'm crazy. I'm washing the dishes and I'm like, that ain't it. They're like, who are you talking to, Mom? I'm like, she's trying to come out and she's saying something negative that's not going to support me in my mind. I'm shutting it down and I'm telling her, and I still love you. And I still love you. With all of that thing that you just said, as I'm worrying and stressing about the bills or whatever it is, she comes up because she knows what it feels like for the bottom to drop out. Ooh. So she comes to be able to say, what if this don't get paid? What if the car don't? What if, right? She's worried because as a child, she watched the adults who were supposed to love her, who were supposed to hold her down. She watched them go buck wild crazy. So what we get to do is acknowledge when that inner child is coming, she's coming or he's coming to teach you something about you in that moment. Stop pushing it back with drugs, with alcohol.
Numbing. I call it numbing.
With
numbing
sex,
substance.
with all of these
Stop
things.
numbing it with the substance.
Bring her out. Bring them out. my kids used to laugh. They're like, Mom, you going to the park again? Yup. You taking me? Mm-mm. She needs to go. I need to go on the swing for a second. I'm telling you, for about 30 days, and me and my therapist, because yes, that's another thing. Me and my therapist, I counsel hundreds and hundreds of people, but I definitely have a therapist. And I feel like in 2024, if somebody don't have a therapist, there's something wrong with them. It is like the new normal. Psychological.
You heard the woman.
I'm telling you. Psychological flexibility training through therapy should be the new normal for everyone. There is no way that you are watching wars on the news, folks dying by the drones, and not taking care of your mental health.
And even in your community, seeing people dying, you seeing people, the police are everywhere. This level of stifleness is unhealthy. And I always go back to conditioning, right? Because as a people, we've just been conditioned to take these bad things and make them badges of pride. Like, oh, this is the I didn't go to the doctor all year badge. Look. Like, you know, like this is the I don't need counseling because I'm fine. That's just how I am.
I'm going to tell you right now, my Black and brown people, we've been strong for too long. I'm claiming a soft season for everybody with the face. I'm claiming a soft season because the reality is that when you're gentle enough and you hurry up and slow down, you begin to see those things and you start to take care of those things that have been lingering for years. And I'm thinking just right now, Black and brown people, we lead in hypertension. We lead the charts in obesity. We lead in diabetes.
We take bad things and make them badges of pride.
Yeah. You know what's interesting though? Like there's certain things that I'm just not taking anymore. There's certain things that I'm not going to take. Right now, the reason why I shifted my work to go back into the schools is because post-COVID, the number one cause of death for teenagers is suicide. And they're Black and brown. Like, I'm like, suicide. Since when?
Oh my gosh.
If that spirit is what's happening, then we have to arm ourselves with the awareness to know, yes, it's going to require a lot of service. Yes, it's going to require a lot of love. It's also going to require us to stop this stigmatization of therapy and mental health.
Mental health.
We have
These
to
children are making permanent decisions on temporary emotions. I am, I work in data. I'm all about the statistics. And I will implement that statistic in this episode of the amount of children who have committed suicide since the pandemic. Do you understand? It's scary, and when I tell you, every time I think about it, I get goosebumps. It just hurts my soul because I was, like you said, one of those children who all the adults around me were too confused with what's going on with them to be adults. And I remember very vividly for the large portion of my childhood feeling like the only adult in the room. Like I often was just like, when are we going to get to what's important? It's
important to be able to acknowledge something that you said is so powerful. And this is science. This is not Dr. Baez. Scientifically speaking, an emotion can only last 15 minutes. So each emotion has a 15-minute life cycle. So that means happy, glad, sad, mad, all of these ranges, it only lasts 15 minutes. So if emotions are as transitory as they are, the question begins to be asked, like, so why is it shifting us so much? The reality is that after 15 minutes, it's not the emotion that's triggering us. It's what we're telling ourselves about ourselves based on that emotion. That could last 15 years. I'm telling you.
Because it becomes, I call it this string of pain. It becomes a string of pain that and that's where I'm saying being present is so important. Because it can start from seeing a childhood snack to being days in your room because you didn't feel loved, you didn't feel seen, you didn't feel heard. And mental wellness is important. Like I understand the why. So I'm not going to say I don't understand the why. I understand the conditioning. I was a child of my grandparents. I feel like I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it wasn't for my grandmothers. Like they heard me. They understood. They were always told me like, you're too big for your time. You come way too early. You're too big for your time. And I used to laugh and say like, don't say that. It's because I always said it. She was like, sometimes they not, and my grandmother, Gelly, God rest her soul, used to tell me, them not ready for you yet. Them, and that's all. Every time I would get, listen, let me tell, oh no, y'all don't listen to y'all, because I was so big on, like, I'm very observant. Good. And people always shocked that I'm observant because I'm always talking, right? Good. So I'm always like, listen, you didn't even hear what he said. And these are with my uncles and my parents. And I'm just like, and then she used to just be like, them not ready for you yet.
No,
they're not ready for you yet.
And they're not supposed to be. That's the beautiful thing. When God calls you out, he calls you out for a reason. When he calls you out, he lets you know from young. I knew since 5 years old. I got my first visitation at 5 when he told me what I would be doing. And I think when you're called, you know, some folks get really scared because it's a responsibility.
It is.
And I think the beautiful thing about answering the call is that you realize that when you have the vision, God will give you the provisions to make it so. It's not your will. It's not just the power. It's understanding that the passion comes from this divine source
that you cannot silence.
You don't have to.
And you can't. You cannot silence.
So when we think about just kind of bringing all of this together, if we're able to live in a sacred space of service, because it's a sacred gift to serve, and that's how I see it. When we're living in service, that means the acts of service, whether it's waking up, making your bed, whether it's making sure that you're really checking in and checking on the folks that you love, whether it's looking outside of yourself and saying, I'm going to meet this person where they are, and being gentle and kind on the road, and you're not cursing and you're not going crazy when somebody swerves, you're remaining at peace. It's this act of staying present to the present moment, non-judgmentally, so that you can be everything that you need to be moment to moment.
I love that. I love that. And you know what I hear? I hear the first act of service is to yourself.
Always.
The first act of service is first qualifying yourself, loving yourself, seeing yourself. Yeah. Because I think we get into this matrix. Yeah. We get into this matrix of, I want to be of service. I can help. Let me do this. And then it's people pleasing. Yeah. And it just never connects properly.
Yeah. I think when your first act of service is to yourself, you remind yourself of your gift. I think the gifts that we get are from God. How we use those gifts are how we give it back to God. Yeah. So if you continue to use your gifts in ways that are going to serve, I ask myself the same question every day, every morning in the mirror. How will you use me, God, today? How will you use me? And when he gives me this message on how he would use me, my goal is always to be of a little bit more service than I was the day before. I want to just serve greater, increase my territory that I may be everything that you say I am. Not that I say I am. Yeah. I want to be everything that God says I am, because in those moments of self-doubt, I might not say the best or the highest potential of myself. So having that awareness allows me to say, you know what? Everything is right about me. Without ego, everything is right about me, because my God doesn't make mistakes.
He's sticking straight all the time. Like, you know? Hello. And I just want to close with, how have you seen service transition, the definition of how you define service change over time? Like you said, you got the calling really young at 5. So we saw how it looked at 5. We see how it looks now. What did it look like at 15 or 25?
You know, it's so interesting. I serve a master pattern maker. And I think because nothing is really new under the sun, service didn't change. The world keeps trying to change, but my service really remained consistent. I think from 5 years old, where I would just walk around and teach my fellow classmates, my grandmother used to say, Asheena, I would say, this is my love letter. I would read the Bible at 5. I was just reading the Bible and I would say Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. She's like, what? You're singing? I would sing the books of the Bible because I needed to understand this love letter, because I knew that this love letter would teach me how to serve, because God just told me, you will be of great service. Your impact will impact the entire world. So if I'm to do this, I looked at the Bible as my manual.
Yeah.
So if it was that at 5, by the time I was 15, I was hosting my own circles, right? High school, not popular to do that, but I was doing it because I knew that this would lead to something great. Even in college, being able to create, I was the queen of Clark Atlanta University.
Nice.
My platform was service. My platform, I created an organization that went into the community and we did community cleanups and we read to children. And this is me at 17, 18. Became a teacher, a special education teacher, went back to the Bronx, the same schools that I went to. So even as an adult, even as a mom, the idea of service, it stayed as an integral component of who I get to be. And I always looked at service as a get to, not a got to.
Oh,
I don't have to.
You get to serve. You get to serve.
So that's my definition. Service is a get to for your spirit to be able to finally know. Like I was reading something a while ago, and I feel like service and my relationship with God is simultaneous, is interconnected, because my spirituality, my service, even the love that I have for humanity is where my soul goes to hide.
Ooh.
Is where my soul goes to hide. It's the greatest act of love. That's my definition of service. It is the highest, greatest, most sacred act of love, is to serve.
I love that. Thank you so much. This conversation has been transformational. I have really, truly enjoyed it. I know you all have enjoyed it. And we just really appreciate that you coming down to How Do You Define and having this conversation. And closing out, I like to leave us with a light note to just connect us back. What are you listening to? What's on repeat? What you listening to, Asheena?
I am listening to so many things, but the one that's on repeat right now is my boy Tim Bovin. I'm listening to I'm Good. And if you can't listen, like, that song gets me like up in the morning. So please check that out.
Yes, that is so good. I love that. Love to hear that. And tell us about your most recent project. You just became an author.
Praise God.
Hello.
Praise God. Looking at a way to really help transform folks in a finite amount of time. It's a 30-day journal. It's called Speak What You Seek Until You See What You Said. It's the power of manifestation.
Come on.
And it'll take you through 30 days of self-reflection, meditation, prayer. The most amazing thing about this book is that everyone who has read it has been transformed.
I love that.
So please check it out. It's on Amazon.
Speak What You Seek. I'm going to have all the links in the description box. You can find Speak Where You Seek. And Asheena, where can we find you?
Oh man, please. You can always reach out to me directly. Come to my website, AsheenaBaezConsulting.com, or IG at Asheena Baez Consulting. I can't wait to see y'all.
Yes. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for coming. And this is How Do You Divine? Service. Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening. Continue to add dimensions to your definitions. Please join the conversation on all social platforms. #HowDoYouDivine. See you soon.